Let's get real for a moment about that nest egg you've been building. If you are one of the millions of people who have been diligently saving for retirement in a traditional 401k or an IRA, you've done an incredible job. For decades, you followed the rules. You put money aside, you let it compound, and you watch that balance grow. It feels like security, it feels like your money, but there is a silent partner in your account that you might have forgotten about, and he has been waiting very patiently for his turn to cash out. You see, the deal you made when you started these tax-deferred accounts came with a massive catch. The government allowed you to skip paying taxes on that money years ago, and they let it grow tax-free for all this time. But that wasn't a gift, it was a loan. And now, as you approach retirement, the bill is finally coming due. There is a specific mechanism the IRS uses to make sure they get their cut, and if you aren't paying close attention to the changing rules, this mechanism can completely derail your financial planning. This mechanism is what we call a required minimum distribution, or RMD for short. It is absolutely critical that you understand exactly what this is, because the name implies exactly what will happen. This isn't a friendly suggestion from the IRS that you might want to start spending your savings. It is a mandatory, non-negotiable command. Think of your retirement account as a balloon that has been filling up with air for 30 or 40 years. The RMD is the government's way of untying the knot and forcing the air out, whether you need the money or not. The logic is simple. The IRS can't tax that money until you withdraw it, so they are going to force you to withdraw a specific calculated amount every single year so they can finally treat it as ordinary income and tax it. For many retirees, this is a shock. You might have planned to live frugally, or maybe you wanted to leave that money growing for your heirs, but the RMD rules say no. The tax holiday is officially over, and you are forced to generate taxable income that you might not even want. However, knowing what an RMD is constitutes only half the battle. The real confusion, and where most people get into trouble, lies in knowing exactly when this clock starts ticking. This is where things have become incredibly tricky in recent years. If you think you know the rules because you read a finance article 5 years ago, you need to wipe that slate clean. The goalposts have moved not once, but twice. For a long time, the magic number was age 70 and a half, then it shifted to 72. But recently, a massive piece of legislation known as the Secure 2.0 Act completely overhauled the timeline again, creating a split system that has left a lot of retirees scratching their heads. Getting this start date right is not just a detail, it is the foundation of your entire withdrawal strategy. So let's simplify the confusion right now. The new system divides retirees into two distinct groups based on one single factor, your birth year. You need to listen closely to this part. If you were born before 1960, your mandatory withdrawals begin at age 73. However, if you were born in 1960 or any year after that, the government has given you a slight extension. Your RMDs do not kick in until you turn 75. It seems like a small difference, but mistaking age 73 for 75 or vice versa can lead to catastrophic errors. And speaking of errors, you might be wondering, what's the big deal if I miss my start date by a year or get the math wrong? Well, that brings us to the cost of making a mistake. Let's be brutally honest about what happens if you simply forget to take this money out, or if you miscalculate the amount by even a few dollars. The consequences are severe. Historically, the penalty for missing an RMD was one of the harshest in the entire tax code, a staggering 50% tax on the money you failed to withdraw. Now, the new rules have lowered that to 25%, but don't let that lower number fool you into complacency. A 25% penalty for a paperwork error is still a financial disaster. To put this into perspective, imagine you have $1 million retirement portfolio. At age 73, your required withdrawal would be roughly $42,000 for the year. If life gets busy and you miss that deadline, you don't just owe the income tax on that money, you owe the IRS an additional penalty check for over $10,000. That is $10,000 of your hard-earned savings vanishing into thin air just because of a calendar mistake. It is painful, it is expensive, and most importantly, it is completely avoidable. But the penalty isn't actually the biggest threat here. The real danger is something financial planners call the RMD tax bomb. See, most people head into retirement assuming their taxes will go down. You stop working, your salary disappears, and you expect to be in a lower tax bracket. But RMDs can ruin that plan. Because these withdrawals are mandatory, they can force you to recognize tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxable income that you don't actually need for your lifestyle. This extra income is stacked right on top of your Social Security and other earnings, potentially shoving you into a much higher tax bracket than you ever anticipated. This is the bomb waiting to go off. So, how do we defuse it? You don't have to just sit there and let these mandatory withdrawals happen to you. You can take control using a powerful strategy known as a Roth conversion. The concept is straightforward. Instead of waiting for the government to force you to take money out at age 73 or 75, you voluntarily choose to move some of that money now. You take a portion of your traditional IRA, pay the taxes on it today at a rate you know and can control, and convert it into a Roth IRA. Why would you do that? Because once that money is inside a Roth IRA, the rules change entirely. Roth IRAs are tax-free forever, but more importantly, they do not have required minimum distributions during your lifetime. By systematically moving money out of the RMD bucket and into the tax-free bucket before you hit that critical age, you are effectively shrinking the base that the IRS can target later. You are paying a little tax now to save a fortune in taxes later. However, there is one critical rule you must know. If you are already old enough to be taking RMDs, you are required by law to take your RMD for the current year before you are allowed to convert a single penny to a Roth. Now, maybe you aren't interested in a Roth conversion, or maybe you hate the idea of paying taxes today. If you are charitably inclined, there is another magic trick in the tax code called a qualified charitable distribution, or QCD. This is arguably the most tax-efficient way to give money away. A QCD allows you to transfer funds directly from your IRA to a qualified charity, bypassing you entirely. Here is why this is so powerful. Normally, to get a tax break for donating, you have to itemize your deductions, which many retirees don't do anymore. But with a QCD, the money you send to the charity counts toward your RMD for the year, yet, and this is the key, it never shows up on your tax return as income. It essentially vanishes for tax purposes. You satisfy the IRS requirement, you support a cause you care about, and you keep your taxable income lower, which can help lower your Medicare premiums and keep your Social Security tax-free. It is a true win-win scenario, allowing you to meet your obligations without inflating your tax bill. So, we have covered the definition, the dangerous new timelines, and the tax-saving strategies. But information without action is just trivia. Let's bring this all home and convert this knowledge into a concrete 4-step game plan that you can start executing today. You don't want to figure this out when you are blowing out the candles on your 73rd or 75th birthday cake. You want to figure it out now. Step 1 is to map out your entire financial landscape. Do not look at your IRA in a vacuum. You need to project all your sources of income in retirement. This includes your Social Security benefits, any pensions you might have, and investment income from taxable accounts. You need to know your baseline floor of income before the RMDs even touch the picture. Step 2 is to estimate your future RMDs, and this is where people often get surprised. Remember, your account is likely still growing. A $1 million portfolio today could easily grow to $1.5 million by the time your mandatory withdrawals kick in. Use an online calculator to project that future balance and apply the RMD factor to it. You might find that your required withdrawal isn't $40,000, but perhaps $60,000 or $70,000 a year. Step 3 is to combine those numbers and identify the risk. Take that projected RMD and stack it on top of your baseline income. Does that total number push you into a tax bracket you are uncomfortable with? Does it trigger higher Medicare premiums? This is the stress test for your retirement plan. If the math looks ugly, that brings you to step 4, choosing your weapon. Based on that risk assessment, decide right now if you need to start aggressive Roth conversions to lower your future balance, or if you need to set up a qualified charitable distribution plan. Ultimately, it all comes down to one crucial philosophy. Is your retirement plan designed by you, or is it designed by the IRS? These required withdrawals are not just a minor administrative detail, they are a fundamental piece of your financial architecture. If you ignore them, you are handing the steering wheel over to the government and letting them dictate your tax bill. But if you plan for them proactively, you remain the pilot of your own financial future. You worked decades for this freedom. Make sure you keep it. I would be grateful for any support. Write a comment, subscribe, and like. It really helps the channel.